Hey guys, Jaryd Krause, host of the Buying Online Businesses podcast. And today we're very lucky that we get to speak to Yaro Starak. Now, Yaro was one of the first people I ever knew to be buying and selling websites. I actually saw him on stage speaking at a mutual friend of ours seminar talking about buying and selling websites. Now, lucky enough, we get to have Yaro come on board and talk about how he went away and sold his first ever website for $15,000. Now, Yaro started making money online back in 1998, and he's been through and built many companies and bought also many websites as well. And we talk about the different types of websites he's bought, and we talk about why he bought those types of websites. We also talk about the risks that are involved with due diligence and why we should not be rushing through our due diligence and what to do instead. We also talk about why we should never cut corners and how to become a better entrepreneur and investor overall. So if you're looking to buy websites and hear from other experts who have done so and exceeded very well in their success in becoming an entrepreneur, don't miss this episode because it's stacked with so much value and how to become great at buying website businesses. Hey everyone, and welcome back to a Buying Online Businesses episode. Now, I am super grateful. I just had a really good chat with Yaro Starak from yaro.blog, and we had a really good chat before we jumped on, and we just realized, wow, we should have hit the record button a lot earlier. Now, Yaro started making money back in 98 when he first started one of his sites. It was cards, if I believe, and then he's worked his way up to having one of the longest running entrepreneur podcasts, and has been through this space and has multiple businesses now and doing great things, offering really good and valuable services to people like myself in the online space and you guys that are listening too. So Yaro, thank you so much for coming on. I do greatly appreciate it.
Oh, thanks for having me, Jaryd. And yeah, hopefully we can repeat some of the stuff we've already said in a more cohesive manner, perhaps.
Yeah, well, I'm sure we will get back into that.
Yeah.
And what we were talking about for everybody listening is where Yaro, I first saw Yaro speak at somebody's event on the Gold Coast where I live, and Yaro is originally from Brisbane. Now, I saw him speak about talking about sites on Flipper, and I kind of learned a little bit about that, and it just went way over my head, Yaro, to be honest, because I was in this phase that I was a travel blogger, and I was like, I just want to learn as much from you as I can through blogging. And I started travel blogging. Everybody said, it's too hard. You're not going to make any money doing it. And I was like, I'll prove you wrong. Made a little bit of money. But what I realized at that time, everybody with an iPhone and an internet connection was my competition as a travel blogger. So then I started going, wow, this is really hard. And the 90% failure rate of startups, I tried to start my own dropshipping business and all that. And then I went, all right, maybe Yaro's onto something here with Flipper, and I bought my first website off Flipper. And when was it that you were just telling me before, you started looking into Flipper and buying sites from Flipper before it was actually called Flipper? Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, the spark of the idea actually goes all the way back to that card game website. And this was before, I think, definitely before Flipper existed as a separate entity. I'm not even sure, to be honest, there was any online forum or place to buy and sell websites. It probably was. Maybe it was in the SitePoint marketplace, like where I first discovered this. But for me, it was actually just a standalone thing. I had this Magic the Gathering collectible card game website that I'd grown from scratch as a teenager. I played the game, and I was like, I think I was 21 maybe. And I had a second business. So I had an online essay editing company, which I was way more focused on. I'd kind of grown out of this card game business, but I kept it, and it was making a bit of money from advertising. And I thought, you know what, this site makes money and I don't have to be the owner of it. It's kind of like property. So why don't I try and sell it? And it was such a silly, like, I remember I was crossing the road in the Queen Street Mall in Brisbane. I'm like, it's all the metrics of property. It's got a revenue stream, it's got an asset base, it's got a domain name, which is like an address. Someone else will see value in it, therefore it's sellable. And then from that point forward, it was like, how do I sell it? So there wasn't like, Flip or anything like that. So, back then the obvious thing was to go, in my mind anyway, it was obvious, find the people who would find value in the site. So it had an audience of Australian-based Magic the Gathering card players and traders. So to me, the most likely buyer was another person who buys and sells the cards. So I started, emailing the retail store owners in Australia and actually globally. And then I actually posted in my own forum. I had a trading forum for people who were buying and selling cards. And eventually the buyer of that site came out of that forum. He was using my site to buy and sell cards. So for him, it's like, well, I'd like to own the site that I'm already using to do these transactions. Yeah. So we got on the phone, had a conversation. In my mind, I'm like, I think this site is worth $15,000. And that was because I did like a 3 times yearly multiple. And literally I pulled that number out of nowhere. And like nowadays, we've got so many more data points to go what a site should be worth. But for me, it's like, well, the site makes $500 a month, and it's, maybe 6,000 a year, plus a bit less than that in profit because there's some expenses. So let's say it makes about 5,000 a year times by 3, it's $15,000. So I came to him with that price. We negotiated. I ended up selling it for, I think, 13 and a half. And, I was stoked, to be honest. That was the most money I'd ever made up to that point in any single point in time. I think that was my entire yearly part-time job income from the previous year. So I'm like, this is awesome. And from that point onwards, it was always an idea in my head. It is possible to buy and sell websites. I didn't think of it anything more than a side project. I never thought I'm going to deep dive into this idea because I was focusing on my editing company. And then I got into blogging, as you know, and I started this entrepreneur's journey blog and sort of got lost in that world. But that's actually what led me to Flippa and all this whole world of buying and selling. It's because I was running a blog. I had contact with other bloggers in my space, and this guy, Michael Pollack, had a blog called Small Business Branding. And he said to me, listen, I'm thinking of getting out of this space and I want to offload my blog. And I hadn't thought of buying a site. I'd thought of selling one. And this is the first time I'm like, well, I could buy a site. And it's on a similar topic to my own blog. I have an entrepreneurship blog. This guy's a small business blog. They're not too dissimilar. It's like buying new audience. I could, make more money from advertising, grow my email list from that audience, expand my empire. So I went to bed, tried to come up. I didn't have a lot of money in savings. I think it was like my $13,000 from the sale. And I did the math. How much money is this site making? I think he made about $200 a month in AdSense and maybe a little bit from affiliate money. So I went to him, I think I offered him 2,000 US for it. And he was like, you know what, because I want to get this deal done smooth. I know you, it'll be easy. I trust you. I'll do it. And we did the sale. And then to my surprise, after I blogged about it, a bunch of other bloggers wrote about me acquiring another blog, because at that point, this idea of buying blogs was fairly new. So it was newsworthy at the time. And then that's when I kind of had experienced both sides of the equation, the buying, the selling. And it became like something I thought, okay, there's something to this. That's when I started watching Flippa. I'm like, all right, I might, really keep an eye on this site, see if something pops up that I can invest in. I was at that point totally into blogging. Like I was no longer, it was my essay editing company was there, but it was running mostly by itself. I was writing every day. I was podcasting a lot. I still do that. It hasn't changed. I just don't do it nearly as much as I did. And, back then I was literally writing every day. Now I don't, although I did write today. And I was doing my podcast and I loved it. And I hadn't, we're going back like 10 years. I created a lot of content since then. But what for me was interesting was this idea of taking the revenue. I had this money coming in from my essay editing company. My blog was starting to make as much money as my editing company as well. And I saw, partially because I had skills, I knew what it took to run a card game website, a business selling essay services And especially I was getting very confident in this, I guess, online advertising and affiliate marketing space. I'd sold ads on my card game business. I'd sold ads on my blog. So I'm thinking, I could buy some more websites. I could possibly optimize the advertising. And this could be like, I called it literally a side investment strategy. And that's how I got into Flippa. So that's kind of, brings it up to the point where I started to take this whole flipping idea seriously.
Yeah, it's interesting to see your journey of like, oh, hang on, this is actually property. And this is what I teach people as well. Like you are actually buying property. It's digital property. You're buying a chunk of space online where you can make money. And then it's also interesting that you learnt this very early and started practicing what I'm sort of preaching, I guess, is that when you start to learn things and acquire skills in the online space, then you can buy those businesses that you can grow with those skills. And a lot of my clients come to me and they don't know anything about running or growing or building a website business. But what they do know is they do have certain skills from other areas of their life. Like for myself personally, I started using my skills with managing team because I had been a site supervisor or a foreman in Australia, they call it, for plumbing firms. So you can transfer some of those skills from the offline to the online. And that's what I love to teach people is that, you've obviously done it. I've done it. It's very, very possible. And so did you go through and buy some sites from Flippa and then use some of those digital marketing and affiliate skills? And what sort of sites were those that you bought and grew?
Yeah, I definitely, like, for me, and I think as you teach your students as well, like it feels more comfortable to look for an asset type that you understand. So, I started watching Flippa and I watched a few other websites, but by far the most of the deals were going through Flippa at the time. And for me, it's like, okay, I can see a website that's totally based on, I think back then it might have been Google ads, paying for ads through Google. Nowadays, it could be Facebook ads or whatever. And I was like, I'm not a pay-per-click marketing expert. So for me to take over a site like that, it's just too overwhelming and it would take me too long to figure it out. So I kind of stayed clear of what I didn't know. And I looked for basically two sites. I had two strategies. I understood blogs. To me, that made sense. So I'm like, I'll look for blogs that were basically good, obviously traffic. That's, the obvious thing, a lot of unique visitors and page views, but also how they monetized. So, if they were doing advertising sales, affiliate product sales, or digital product sales of their own creation, I got that. I was doing it myself. I felt like if I could take over something like that, I could make it work. I understood it. But actually, the main target I really wanted to find were forums. This was, I guess, a little bit of a unique throwback to my card game website because I owned a trading card forum, as I mentioned earlier. And the reason why I wanted to acquire more forums was the user-generated content aspect.
Yes,
so,
yes.
I was already maxed out on content. And I learned this after acquiring a second blog, as I explained. So I bought the second blog and suddenly I've got to write to two blogs. I'm like, okay, this is not going to work if I buy another blog, another blog, another blog. I can't just sit here and double and triple and quadruple my output as a person. Now, I knew I could bring on guest writers and possibly one other blogger, take over. But when I thought back to my forum experience, I'm like, now that's smart. You have a community that's creating content. They're coming back every day to talk to each other. So I was primarily searching for forums-based sites with a healthy community. And then if they were making money from the same methods, advertising, affiliate marketing, and or selling some kind of digital products. So I understood the monetization method, and the traffic was stable because of user-generated content. That was my sweet spot. So I started looking every day on Flippa for that kind of site. And it took a while. So I'm sure
they're not that popular forums anyway, really. Like,
well, yeah, I
think popular back then, a bit more popular back then though. for sure.
Yeah, I mean, they still weren't like every day you'd find a new forum popping up. I think, yeah, even today it's probably far rarer to find one. I
Yeah,
mean, it's
it
just
is.
an old format, right? No one
Yeah,
starts forums
nobody's.
nowadays.
Yeah,
Yeah, but they do
unless you're
exist, and
Reddit.
yeah, right. And I think there's probably, the equivalent of that in other types of content, some kind of user generated content like a marketplace as opposed to a forum. But for me, I got forums. I understood how to manage one as well. And, I remember one popped up and I was too slow. Like, as you know, probably very
Somebody else.
well,
Yeah,
once the metrics are good, you've got 24 hours to get in there and make an offer because you're going to be going up against competition. So missed one. Unfortunately, maybe that probably made me a little bit skittish with how fast I wanted to move on anything after that. I might have, been a bit more risk tolerant because I
yeah.
felt like I'm going to miss it if I'm not pushing myself. So, but in a case of serendipity, I guess some forums popped up that were on a subject that I'd never heard of, called miniature motorcycles. Now, you might have heard of them. They seem
I
to be
wanted to
popular.
buy one. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'd never heard of these things. For some reason, every Australian I speak to knows what a miniature motorcycle is. It
Is
must
it
be
one of
a
those
thing.
pocket bikes?
Exactly.
Yeah,
In
I want
fact,
to buy those.
one of the sites was called Pocket Bike Racing. So it's
Yeah.
so these they're proper motorcycles, just small.
Yeah.
And there's a thriving community, and people ride them on weekends. And this person was an Australian selling two forums on this topic, plus another sort of video blog type site on miniature motorcycles. And the revenue is, if I remember right, about $1,000 a month, primarily from AdSense and I think a bit of affiliate income. And the forums were solid; like they had good everyday a chunk of new posts, a good membership base, looked like original content, not bots filling up with fake content,
Right.
that sort of thing. Back then, you didn't have to worry so much about the bots, I think, as you might have to nowadays. But anyway, the numbers look good. And I'm like, everything ticks the box. And what I really liked about it was one of the domain names was a .com.au. So for whatever reason, the owner was hesitant to sell to non-Australians because of that old rule where you had to be an Australian business owner to buy a .com.au. So that immediately meant that I had far less competition to get a hold of that particular deal. So I went in there with an offer. I think 12,000 was my purchase price on that one. I think that was pretty close to the
That's
asking.
really good multiple because, if it's doing 1,000 revenue per month, I dare say, there's not a lot of upkeep in expenses. It's a good multiple. Yeah.
Yeah, I think probably if you took out hosting, maybe, I don't know, I can't remember. It's so long ago that one. What else costs there were? There might have been some software like to pay for the forum software and things like that. So maybe 800 a month, 900 a month was profit. So yeah, you're looking at. I remember, I think it was around 18 months if I did the math to return, if everything held true. As you know, when you buy a site, you're like, is this really as good as it seems?
Yeah.
But that was going in. That was the expectation, that this was an 18-month turnaround, which I think today, if you ever saw that, would be absolutely like a needle in a haystack. I don't think you get an 18-month return. But even a 3-year or 2-year return, I remember, like, if you saw those kind of sites, that would not happen in property, for example. You don't buy a house and pay for the entire mortgage in 3 years or 4 years or 5 years just from the rent revenue. So I'm like, or even a business, it's very rare to go and buy a franchise and make back your entire franchise fee in the first 12 months or 18
franchises
months.
are hard because you've got, and people, you can't, people won't take on franchises these days because of the work that's required as well.
Yeah. So everything looked great. I mean, it's harder today, as you know well, but that was, the sweet spot. Everything was great. So did the deal. Had one little caveat, if I remember right. I'd like to do a 50% upfront and then a 50% a month later. I often did that with my deals because I wanted to actually take over the site. I wanted to see the numbers were true, that matched. I want to see the AdSense money coming into my AdSense account and not theirs. And everything checked out. And yeah, it seemed legit. And after a month, I paid the second payment and took over. And I had a strategy with that, though, which I can dive into going forward, because this was meant to be a side project. I didn't want to take my time, doing the things, the renovations, as you'd call it, the improvements of the site. I had ideas, but I wasn't going to be the guy sitting there, managing the community, implementing the improvements, because I was too busy blogging and creating my own products and so on. So
yeah. That was something we were talking about before we jumped on, is like spinning too many plates. And this is something that I bought into, and you picked it up quite well in your entrepreneurial journey compared to me. I thought, all right, I'm going to buy because I bought my first site at 15,000, so roughly around the same as you. And I bought it from Flipper. And I thought, okay, awesome. If I'm making this amount of money, I need to buy a bigger one or another one. And then I bought that one and I was like, cool, I just need to scale up and get my expenses covered and grow. So I thought I'd buy another one. And I kept buying businesses. And contrary to what people may think, especially what I thought back then, is that it's actually the worst thing you can do, or one of the worst things you can do, is to add more to your plate, because that means those other businesses, especially like your blog, Yaro, gets a lack of focus and you can't really get it to its ultimate potential. And then, if you're a business owner and you're trying to service clients and trying to give value to people, you end up letting them down. And that's ultimately the worst thing you can do for people that are coming and viewing your content and stuff like that. So
yeah, it's funny though, like, you're like me though, no doubt. We're entrepreneurs. We want to do everything. They all these ideas look exciting. And it's interesting for me in particular, speaking to you now, because the last maybe 3-4 years, I've completely broken those rules, and I've got like 3 or 4 different projects going now. But the difference, and this is, I guess, a lesson for people who stick to one thing. It's like a transition. You start by needing to make your own cash flow just to survive. Yeah. Then you start to make enough that you have options. And that's when you go, oh, I'm going to buy a second business, or I'm going to start a second business. But when you do it at that phase, like you said, it tends to dilute whatever's working. I did that as well. When I had my essay editing company, I started an English school in Brisbane, in the real world. And I spent all my time at the English school, paying for rent from my online business, and they both, were suffering. The English school went nowhere, and my editing company stopped growing. So I was like, all right, this is stupid. Got rid of the English school, went back to the editing company focus. But now, fast forward to today, when I have these second, third businesses, it's, for example, my main project right now, it's called InboxDone. It's we basically do email for people. It's a place to outsource your email. But I would have never started that on my own. I have a co-founder who manages it all. I bring something. I bring audience and reputation. I'm kind of like the marketing manager. But Claire, my co-founder, runs the business, handles our staff, handles our clients, and I would never attempt to do that as well. It just wouldn't work.
Yeah. And that's what we were talking about as well before we hit the record buttons, is that when you get to a certain level, you want to buy more businesses and get more properties as per such, and get more of an income, but you don't want to add more things to your plate. So there's sort of 2 options. You can buy businesses with teams, or we're talking about, people, like a lot of people coming to me and saying, hey, Jaryd, just buy me a business and run it for me. And that's kind of where we will head eventually. But where, like, I've still got teams running my businesses that I still want to get done as well. And then, like, next year, there's going to be bigger doors opening. But it's a big thing, is that once you get past that survival stage, and that is, like, I still think for me personally, that's my biggest achievement, because it's hard. It's like, I know that you never ended up working for somebody else, and I take my hat off to you.
Never had a full-time job, no.
Yeah. But most of us did. And it's like, it's hard. It's hard work. And I think I definitely wouldn't be where I'm at today if I didn't buy businesses, because I found it so hard in the startup phase. And I'm sure you're a testament to that as well.
I mean, I love it all. I love the buying. As you can tell, I had a number of acquisitions. I love the selling. I sold that editing company for 100 grand. We haven't covered that story. And that money was huge. I bought my first property in Brisbane and a new car. I love starting companies that are based 100% on me, like my blogging business. And I love the partnerships like with Claire and InboxDone.com. But, we're talking about a 20-year career. All of that stuff can't happen at once. And there's certainly a progression that you go through. And yeah, it kind of sucks the most at the start. Let's be honest here. Until you get survival money, you're working your ass off just to get the rent and the food and so on. And then you start to build a little bit of capital, a little bit of income that generates without you working. And then you suddenly have options. And in fact, when I started buying websites off Flippa, that was probably the first time I ever had a little extra money beyond what I needed, I guess. So I felt like, what's a way to invest this? And I remember I read Rich Dad Poor Dad around that time for the first time.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And I everyone talks about this book for investing. Yeah. It's like how every property investor gets their start is by reading that book. And I think I had contemplated getting into a bit more property investing around that time, but it was also, this crazy Sydney, Melbourne prices skyrocketing. Brisbane was going nowhere. And I'm like, I'm not sure. I don't have a lot of money, so I can't really go crazy there. And I read Rich Dad Poor Dad, and I'm like, yeah, I shouldn't be getting into property investing in that world. I should do it in a space I understand with much lower entry costs. I'm like, I can buy a website for, 10 grand, 12 grand, where the property would be 20 grand deposit and then a huge mortgage with a 25-year run rate. And I have no real control over changing that income either. And plus, I'm just not passionate about doing all the research and finding, good properties at that time anyway. I do that now actually here in Canada. But back then, I certainly was not into that. So to me, buying websites was like the smartest and obvious choice, at least for a number of years. And that's what led to buying those sites. The strange thing is though, fast forward 4 years later, my mindset changed and I'm like, I can't, even though I've outsourced as I guess the story continues, just to clarify here, when I bought these miniature motorcycle sites, the strategy there was to bring on a manager essentially. And I already had a person in my life who I knew would be perfect for it. It was a young guy. When I say young, I was probably 27, he was 23, so not that different, but he was eager to learn internet marketing. He already was exposed to that space. And I'm like, let's do a partnership. I trusted him. He'd actually been one of my guest writers on my blog.
Oh, great.
And yeah, so we had that connection, a bit of rapport, and I felt he was smart enough to do this. And I said, what we'll do is let's split the revenue from this collection of miniature motorcycle sites. So I immediately halved my income, which, that's not necessarily great, but I was like, if he can pull off what I wanted to do. And I said to him, the plan here is, first of all, let's just make sure the site does what it's supposed to do, take over, introduce yourself in the forum community so that they know we're here as new owners and we're invested in this site, but we're not going to change anything too crazily, and make sure the revenue works. And then I said, well, after that phase, we're going to do a renovations phase, basically. So I knew how to optimize placement of advertising. So we did that. I said, listen, we need to put a banner here, move the ad here, add an extra ad block here. And as I'd learned from my card game website, we're not going to just do Google AdSense. We're going to sell ads directly to companies for like $100 a month or $50 a month. And he did that. He did all that. So he was the one who created the new banner placements.
And you're just advising and stuff. So you'd have like an hour call every sort of a week or 2 weeks?
Yeah, I think probably every week we probably spoke for an hour, or maybe every now and then he'd come to me with a problem. But he was motivated because he instantly had this AdSense income. I think AdSense was probably like $500 a month. So he immediately had $250 a month in revenue coming in. And he obviously knew that that money would not keep coming in if these renovations didn't actually happen and things didn't work. And they did. So the long story short is the selling ads directly, the optimization of placement, and we also tested a few affiliate products to the audience, doubled income within 3 months. So we went from $1,000 a month to $2,000 a month. Yeah, and that was great because it meant that I could pay him a great return. I'd still make the minimum 1,000 a month that I was making when I bought the site. So it paid for itself in 18 months, right? So, because that roughly, but then once it paid for itself, and eventually, obviously, I stopped needing
advising.
to do. Yeah, so it became completely hands off, and I think eventually I can't remember how long the partnership lasted, but once we did a lot of the renovations, the optimization, there wasn't much for him to do. So we settled on him doing like a light management role for a set chunk of the ad sensing, but I kept the rest of the revenue. So I think I ended up keeping like 1,500 a month, and he got 500 a month. So for another sort of year and a half, it was pure profit. And then I ended up selling them. So I actually sold the whole network of sites, I think about 3 years after buying them, for about double my purchase price. So about 25,000. I think it was 30,000, because I remember there was one other set I sold for 20. Anyway, it was about 25 or $30,000. And, all around it was great, because that was pure profit. It paid for itself. It was a great experience. Loved it. But the reason I sold it, because I know people always ask, why do you sell a site that, you don't need to do anything for, right? And what happened was my blogging business was really starting to take off. I'd launched my first course, and it was doing really well. And in my mind, I'm like, this is when I'm thinking I need to mentally focus. So even though I was just being an advisor, when you have 2 miniature motorcycle sites as well as a video on that subject, I actually bought another community forum by that stage on rap music, which as a case study didn't do nearly as well. It broke even. None of my renovations improved the site. It's not as exciting a story just to tell. I ended up selling it for the exact same price I bought it at. Nothing really happened there, but it was still another asset that I own. So I'm thinking rap music, I'm thinking miniature motorcycles, I'm thinking my essay editing company.
It's hard.
I've got, it's all going in there. So I'm like, you know what I love? I love content creation and coaching and creating these courses. It's working. I'm going to liquidate. And that's when I sold the essay editing company. That was a $100,000 deal. There's another story there on how I sold that one, sold the miniature sites. They ended up going to, I don't know if you know Will Swain. He's a Brisbane-based marketing results guy. Anyway,
I've met him, no.
He connected me with someone, eventually bought the miniature motorcycle site. So I don't think I ever used Flippa to sell, only to buy from. And all my sales came from the network, either within the site itself or my own friendship, personal business network. But yeah, I liquidated everything and went all in on the blogging space. And, ever since then, I still carefully watch. Yeah, I mean, it's a great story, and I'm still tempted. I think, as I mentioned off air before we spoke, I'm still subscribed to the Flippa newsletter, and I just see these sites, and I look at the numbers. They're not as good as back when I was really into it, but they're still good. You still see something earning $2,000 a month, selling for like 20 grand, and I'm like, that's 10 months of, okay, it's revenue, not profit. So maybe it's not 10 months, it might be 20 months or 30 months if it actually does what it says. But I still think it's such a great opportunity.
There is so many opportunities, and on Flippa, there are a lot of sites, and they're tightening up. So we've had everybody that hasn't listened, go back to episode number 5. I think I had it was Blake Hutchison who's the CEO of Flippa, came on and told me that they're tightening things up. Whereas previously you'd get emails like making X amount per month, and it's only cost this, and you're like, wow. There's so many things that tie back into what you were saying, is like you were wanting to buy a site or a forum, right? And you're like, oh wow, these are going so quick. So you change your strategy a little bit and became a little bit more risk prone. And I wanted to say to everybody, that's all my community and everybody that listens to this is what we tend to do, is we tend to go, oh, like I need to be quicker, especially if you're going to buy sites at the 10 to 20, 30K range, because there's people out there that's where everybody wants to dip their toe in, where they're not buying a startup, but they're buying an actual business. But don't compromise. I compromise on this too, Yaro, is that I wanted to do it real quick, and yeah, that's what we are. Like entrepreneurs, we want it to happen overnight, or have it to happen yesterday. So I just want to share with everybody listening is like, don't rush it. Like, do your due diligence well. And if you miss it, you were supposed to miss it, and the right one will come along. And don't I've got free tools. Like go to my website, get free tools on how to do your due diligence. It's in the resources there, and like learn it before you do. Then when you learn it really well, then you can do it quicker and you don't make mistakes. Does that make sense, Yaro?
Oh, I totally agree.
Because did you come close with any that you're like, oh, maybe I shouldn't have gone as far down the rabbit hole with it?
There were a few sites where in the hindsight, I was glad I did get outbid on, because I didn't have the chance to do the due diligence the way I would have liked to. Thankfully, a lot of what I looked at, the due diligence was easy. I go into the forum of the site I want to buy, and I see how active, how busy, what kind of conversations are going on. I look at how they're making money. I see the ads, or I see the products they're selling. But, if you're going in to buy an app, it's very hard to, you can download the app and use it. You don't really know how many users are using it. What really is the revenue, or, anything driven by pay-per-click advertising. You can't see their ad campaigns. You can't do due diligence quickly or easily. So I think a lot of it depends on the format, your strategy, what you're going after. But for sure, there's some universal laws, which I'm sure you're teaching with your due diligence process, that get your basics. Like for me, when I have taught this subject too, I always would tell people, if you don't understand how the site gets an audience and how it generates revenue, you probably shouldn't be buying it. At least conceptually, you should understand how it works. So you wouldn't buy a house
At
going
first glance as well. Pretty much.
Right. Well, yeah, it should be straightforward enough. And if not, then you just don't understand the whole industry well enough yet to be, dipping your toes into that. Unfortunately, there's a lot of that, because it's a business opportunity, and that market is rife with people who get suckered in with that sort of, shiny object syndrome. It's in blogging too. It's in any area where you're teaching how to make money. And there's a lot of money to be made selling to people who will never make money. They just want to, make money from selling the course or whatever it is. So it's the harsh truth. But for those of us who take the time to learn, there's some amazing possibilities, as some of my stories, and no doubt, yourself, kind of demonstrate.
Yeah, it's we all want to cut corners, and a mate or I know him, but he's starting to become a mate now. He's listening to the podcast and watching some of my stuff. He's like, Jaryd, I want to do this, and I want to do that, and I want to do this, and I want to do that. I was like, all right, cool. How much money are you saving? And he's like, I'm saving like roughly $200 a week. I said, look, like if you go away and buy something, or you go away and get a loan and buy something, and you haven't got your foundation set, then what's going to happen is you're going to get a loan and you're going to leak money. So I call it the bucket, right? The leaky bucket. If you can't plug up the holes and start saving more money personally, how do you think you're going to do it with another entity as well? It's going to end up, you're going to go south a lot quicker and put you in an even worse position. And I just say that to people about the cutting corners thing. It's not a thing. Like you talk about universal laws, we have to go through a certain process and certain things that we need to learn in our life. And it's unfortunate for me, because I'm a crazy hare, and I want it to happen overnight as well. Like I have to struggle through this period to a point where like, okay, now I get it. And so I just want to share that for the younger viewers. Is like, you can't cut corners, can you, Yaro? Like it's just not going to happen.
No, I remember having a conversation at a meetup with I think it was like a 14-year-old, and I just did my talk on how to make money blogging, and he was adamant about sitting down and talking to me one-on-one. I was like, okay, all right. Just before I left, I sat down with him.
Good on you.
He just kept asking me, tell me the secret. How do I actually make money? And I was like, well, like I said in my talk, it's, you got to do all these things in a row, work hard, and then you'll get the result. He's like, no. What's the secret? Like, what are you not telling me? I know you're not giving away everything on the talk. I said, no, I pretty much am. It's just a process. It's a journey. It's a learning experience and an experimental experience. And I think, unfortunately, when you haven't gone through that experience and you hear people talk about making money. You think there is something that you just don't know. And if you knew it, you'd instantly make money. Plus, let's face it, you're really impatient because you've got expenses and you've probably had to work a job and you hate working the job.
Yeah.
So anything you can do to get an alternative income stream as fast as you can. I've been there, and it's not fast. I think that's the worst thing about this. There's no such thing as a get rich quick scheme other than inheritance, winning the lottery. I mean, and those aren't schemes, that's just blind luck, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think, accepting that fact and then making sure you commit to learning a process and implementing a process and seeing it as a long-term process. And then hopefully you enjoy the process. Like, to me, that's the only question to ask yourself, not whether you're making money yet, it's whether you're enjoying the process to do what will eventually lead to making the money. That to me is the most important thing.
Yeah. And there might be a certain stage, through few processes that you have to go through that you're not going to enjoy, like I did. But now you absolutely love what you do. Otherwise, why would you do it? And I absolutely love what I do as well. And you will get through some of these processes to find the right process that you love to do as well, right?
But I bet you even the parts you don't like doing, on some level, you kind of like doing it, like there's pleasure in the pain sometimes. It's kind of a weird twist. I know people who are deep in the trenches and they're so tired of, setbacks. And I get this too. We lose a customer in my current business is like, but then you kind of realize it's part of the puzzle of trying to figure out how to make this work. And I think that's if you can tap into the enjoyment of, the obstacle is the way, as the Stoics say, when you're,
mate, I quote that book so much.
Yeah. Ryan Holiday had a great title for his book there, but that principle from the Stoics, I think it is, if you can truly embrace that idea that when something is not working, if you can really see that as the doorway to figuring out what works, it totally reframes the failure as this tool you can use to figure out what works. It's just hard when you have the 7th or 8th failure in a row or something like that, to keep telling yourself, oh no, the obstacle's the way, I'm going to find the answer eventually.
There's that we're not seeing though as well, right?
Yeah. And I mean, it's easy in hindsight, and it's so important, I think, to celebrate the small successes along the way. That's why, even if you buy a site and it just crashes and burns, I think the fact that you bought one and then understand why it crashes and burns. Like, I bought this wrap community forum, and on the surface it looked perfect. It was another forum, community driven, advertising revenue. I buy it. I put my manager in charge of it, and we start to do things to increase advertising revenue, and nothing works. And we're like, why isn't anything working? And as far as we can tell, it's simply because the audience was maxed out. There was no optimization to be done. It was optimized as best we could get it, without some kind of new source of traffic growth, which would have required new marketing, which is not something we wanted to do. There was no way. And, that was just, okay, we learned, let's liquidate the site, got back our money, basically. Wasted time, I guess you could say. But, you don't know. But that when you compare that to the other site that worked, you go, okay, I'm starting to get insight now and to see where on the surface they look exactly the same, but from behind the scenes now, I know there were some differences there. There were some options in one that didn't work for the other. And I think that's the beautiful thing, when you get to the point where you've gone through both sides and you start going, this is how people actually make money. I remember there's a few times in my life where I read a book or I've gone through an experience with a business, and I'm like, oh, this is how you make like a lot of money, or this is how you get a lot of customers.
You
or
link up the dots from where you're going, don't you?
Yeah. Because before then you're like, I'm just not quite sure how everyone's doing this. I kind of feel like I'm building a website, or I'm trying to find something to buy if you're in the buying space, but you just it's like a cloud. You don't really understand the other side of it. You only can see underneath it,
Yeah.
But
Yeah. I love that analogy. I love that you brought up the obstacles away. It's like people don't want any more problems. They don't want any more frustrations. They don't want any more of the fears. But like we all know that on the opposite side of that fear is massive growth, just like the obstacles away. So thanks so much for bringing that up. I think that's the best way to wrap this up, really. But I also want to touch on like where can people find out more about you and what you're actually doing, because you've got a couple of things going on. You've got your blog and your podcast. Everybody check that out. Yaro has some amazing guests on his podcast and some really good articles on his blog. Check it out. I think it's yaro.blog and the Entrepreneur's Journey podcast.
Yeah, I mean, now it's just the Yaro podcast. I went through a rebrand. I've been mostly known as Entrepreneur's Journey, but I retired that and just went my personal brand about a year ago now. But yeah, I mean, for this topic, I think if you even Google how to buy and sell websites, you will find my articles on that subject pop up still in Google results, which always blows my mind. Yeah. Because I have got a presentation recorded from live events like with Andrew and Daryl in Australia that I talked about some of those deals I talked about here, and there's some articles I've written about that. But I mean, I would probably also say that you, Jaryd, have way more up-to-date stuff than I do. That was a period in my life. What I'm actually like, definitely my blog has got everything that I do, my podcast as well. It's all at yaro.blog. But for those who are interested in my current project, InboxDone is my current business, and it's my main focus.
Cool as well. I just want to say, everybody, like InboxDone, I was listening to another podcast you're on. It's something that I need to start transitioning into, and I actually got some inspiration from it. It's like I started unsubscribing from everything and just trying to just like minimize the stuff that's coming to me. Inbox.
Do you do your own email still?
I do at the moment, and it's there's one of the inboxes is just it's messy, and I need to get it. I need to get it sorted. So yeah.
Well, happy to help.
Yeah.
Turn to sales pitch mode now. No, but yes, but seriously, if anyone does need to break free from their email, that's what we do. We provide a human being to take over your email account, and it could be 80% of your email we take over. Some even 100% they want to get out completely from their inbox. I've had someone do my email for 12 years, all the way since that editing company I talked about, essay editing company, and that's been a huge time saver. In fact, I don't think I could have even did the buying and selling of websites if I wasn't confident that my blogging business, my editing business had people managing the day-to-day email, because that's probably the most time-consuming part of most online businesses. So yeah, InboxDone, if you want to check that out, inboxdone.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much, guys. Go away and check out all those links. They will be in the show notes as well. For everybody listening, thank you for listening. Please go away, like, share, subscribe. If you did actually like anything in this podcast or any of the other episodes, please leave a review so I know what you actually like about it, so I can bring more guests like Yaro and more things to the show that you actually want to hear. Yaro, thank you so much for your time. Greatly appreciate it, especially at the hour that you're over there up in Canada. And I look forward to chatting to you again soon.
Thanks, Jaryd. Bye, guys.
Thank you.